We're in our second message on the life of David, and today I want to talk to you about finding strength when you're overwhelmed. We're going to look at a story in the life of David in 1 Samuel chapter 30 when he and everybody with him faced a very difficult circumstance, and they were completely overwhelmed. This story is the time in which David acts out or lives in one of his roles. We know he was shepherd. We know he was a psalmist. We know he was a singer. He later became king. And in this particular story, he's a military leader. There was a season even before he was king where he had an army of 600 men in this case, and they were doing battles in behalf of the nation of Israel. And they come to a place, a city called Ziklag. Ziklag's one of those great Bible words. It just sounds cool to say Ziklag. And I want that word in your head because later on we're going to show you that, like a lot of names and places in Scripture, the word itself has a meaning that represents what happened at that place. And so I want you to be thinking about Ziklag. This week, rather than read the entire Scripture at the beginning, we're going to make a point and then read that portion that goes with the point. There are 4 points. That doesn't mean it's a longer sermon, but there were 4 things I wanted to say today. So point number 1 in a scripture that goes with us is this, is we should learn to find strength in the midst of difficulty. I think it should be important to say here at the beginning is we are getting information about David's life. King, shepherd, David and Goliath, when he's anointed king, different things that happen in the story at Ziklag today. But information is not really what we're after. It's inspiration is what we're after. Because what we have to realize is that the reason that this is written is not just so we can know, oh, isn't that a cool story? He won a battle and wasn't he a great military leader? No. This story is written because the principles of what David did to find strength when he was completely overwhelmed are accessible to us. The people of Scripture are not like Zeus or somebody way up off the gods up on the hill. They are men and women who walked on the earth just like us, and what they were able to do, we also can learn to do in our own individual lives and context. So let's learn to find strength in the midst of difficulty. Let's read the story and kind of get the setting for this. It's 1 Samuel 30, verse 1. Now it happened when David and his men came to Ziklag on the 3rd day that the Amalekites had invaded the south and Ziklag, attacked Ziklag, and burned it with fire. And they had taken captive the women and those who were there, from small to great. They did not kill anyone, but carried them away and went their way. Verse 3, so David and his men came to the city, and there it was burned with fire, and their wives, their sons, and their daughters had been taken captive. Then David and the people who were with him lifted up their voices and wept until they had no more power to weep. And David's 2 wives, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess and Abigail the widow of Nabal the Carmelite, had been taken captive. And now David was greatly distressed, for the people spoke of stoning him because the soul of all the people was grieved, every man for his sons and his daughters. And here's the key statement. But David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. The city of Ziklag in the story, I believe, for us is a metaphor. It's a picture. It's a word symbol for those situations in our lives where we feel overwhelmed. You ever been in that experience where you've had a few things go wrong, and then the next week a few more went wrong, and then the week after that and one more, and then finally you got to a point when one more thing was too much? Anybody else been there before? It's a place I'm familiar with. Ziklag's been on my map a few times. But it's just we sort of have a threshold, don't we? We have a capacity. I can handle 3 problems at once, but when there's 4, then I'm done. I'm raising the white flag up, and it's more than what I can deal with. And you know, if you haven't been there before, I'm sorry to have to tell you this. Just live long enough, and you'll get to go to Ziklag and camp out there for a little bit, because life is like that. I mean, I'm amazed sometimes. One of the things that I get to witness up close and personal sometimes as a pastor, when I go to someone's home or go to the hospital and I see people in difficult situations with loved ones who are sick or dying, and I watch their faith come to the surface, and I get to see them do what David did somehow in the midst of, and you just walk away amazed. Like, I don't have any idea how they're able to even put two sentences together, but they found strength somehow. So this is a skill I think that can be learned. I think it's a principle in Scripture that David did, that he strengthened himself in the Lord his God in a situation where the city was burned with fire, all their wives and children were taken captive, and his men now, in response to that, say, we're going to kill you. That's some loyalty, right? We're going to stone you. All of them were kind of in a whirlwind of emotion and feeling overwhelmed, but David did something different. It says he strengthened himself in the Lord his God. So here's the meaning of the word ziklag. It comes from a Hebrew verb which means to mentally press, like put pressure on somebody mentally in order to reveal what is inside of them. Now, you don't know what comes first, right? The chicken or the egg. Do trials and difficulties create character, or do they reveal character? Well, it's a little bit of both, right? But most of the time when we really get under pressure, we find out what we're really made of. And we find out what's really inside of us. You may not know how strong your marriage is until you really get under some pressure. And then you're going to find out whether or not the day you stood there and took those vows, if you meant it, and if you've been sowing into it, and if you're going to stay the course and deal with things. You may not know how strong your marriage is till the pressure comes. Every parent takes a breath and says an extra prayer when they send their kid off to college or out into the working world. And they wonder, don't they, is my kid at 18, 19 years old, are they going to be able to stand up under the pressure of the situations they inevitably will be in? And will they represent what I put into their heart all those times of faith and integrity and making good choices and being wise? Are they going to do that, or are they going to give into some of the other things there? I love college football. I watched as much as I could yesterday. I was on the road a little bit when I got back. I think I watched 4 different games or parts of 4 different games. I've loved college football for a long time. There's a caveat of college football that always intrigues me a little bit. It's when the starting quarterback gets injured and they have to put in the backup. And the backup has to go in, 100,000 people in the stadium on ESPN, and try to perform under pressure, oftentimes doing things they've done very little in practice because they are the backup. And I'm always pulling for that guy. I'm always pulling for the underdog guy, the backup quarterback that nobody knows his name yet. He hadn't taken that many snaps. And he's thrown into this situation where there's going to be mental pressure that's going to reveal what's inside of him, right? I think I'm a little bit about that because I played quarterback in high school, and I was in that situation a couple of different times, once as a sophomore and once in college. I may have mentioned this story a little bit before, but I'll tell the whole story today. When I was looking for a college, I was already in the spring of my senior year, and my parents, nobody in my family had gone to college, so we had no idea how to look, what tests, what papers to fill out, where to go. I mean, my parents never even came to the college I attended. They didn't bring me on the day to visit. They didn't bring me when I moved into the dorm at Taylor Hall here at Howard Payne. They just waved by in the driveway, said good luck, and cried because I was the last of 5. And so the way I found out about Howard Payne, because I was trying to figure out where to go to college, and I didn't know, and there was this visiting preacher at our church that worked for the Baptist headquarters in Dallas, and he came to speak at our church. I live close to Dallas. And a leader in our church had told him, hey, we got this kid in our church that he can't figure out where, he wants to be a preacher, we think, but he doesn't know where to go to college. So this guy pulled me aside, and he just had a nice conversation, which I've always appreciated, because I didn't know anything. I didn't know how to do it. And he basically said, what do you want to major in? And kind of asked me a few questions. And then he said, do you want to play a sport, or is there any other activity that you're interested in being involved in? Well, the only reason I even thought about playing college football is because my high school coach, I respected greatly, had said to me a month or 2 before that, he said, Wilburn, you know what? If you really wanted to, I think you could play small college football if you wanted to do it. So that was just kind of in my head. So I said to this guy, I think his name, I'll think of it in a second. I have his book in my office, actually, the guy that told me about Howard Payne. So I just said, yeah, I think I'd kind of like to try to play football. So he took down my information. He said, well, I know the coach. I'll give him a call. So the coach forgot about it. I'm already graduated from high school, and the phone rings. And he says, if you're still interested, we'd like to talk to you. I said, I can be there in the morning. Where's Brownwood? I'm an East Texas guy. I'm like, give me directions. I don't know where. This is before GPS, right? The day before, I'd gone to East Texas Baptist, talked to the baseball coach, and was looking at maybe trying to do that. But then when Howard Payne called, I thought, I liked it better out here because of the professors that I met, not because of the coaches necessarily, and they were okay. So all of that to say, I end up on the football team, and I'm the fifth string quarterback. There were 4 guys ahead of me. And because I was the fifth string, the last string, and the one who didn't know how to throw because I grew up in a wing tee option offense, I'd never even done a passing drill in high school, if you can imagine. My coach didn't even know how to do them because I just handed off and pitched. That's all I did. And so I end up on the team, and I'm on the scout team, which means you get beat up every day. I remember sometimes I'd be involved in a play, and I'd block or get knocked down or whatever, and I'd get up and I'd be walking back, to the huddle. And there was this guy, we called him Super Dave because he could bench about 600 pounds. I'd watched him do it. And he just would grab me and throw me to the ground. And I'd go skipping across the ground. I'd get it. Of course, you don't say anything because it makes it worse. I'd get up, dust myself off, go back to the huddle. Now, all of that to say this. Because I was the scout team quarterback, I'd never run our offense. There were a few times, maybe I'd run a few plays at the end of practice. They'd put kind of the freshman squad over here or whatever. I literally didn't know our offense. I knew maybe 10 plays of our offense. I certainly didn't know any of the passing offense, which was completely foreign to me. And the first or second week in November, the coaches said, okay, we're going to take all the freshmen that haven't gotten to play, and we're going to go play kind of a JV game at Cisco Junior College. So we loaded up on a bus on Thursday night. There was another quarterback on the bus named Michael Aguilar. Michael had played at Churchill High School in San Antonio in a passing offense, and he could really throw. He was a very good passer. And so he was going to start, and I was supposed to play a little bit. So we ride over there. Cisco has 100 guys. I mean, like 100 guys lined up over there or more. We had 30. We already felt overwhelmed. We played. We get into the middle of the third quarter. We're all told everybody's going to get to play a little bit. And in the middle of the third quarter, Aguilar gets hot. He starts passing. We catch up. We were way behind. He scores, and he scores again, then he scores again, like three drives in a row. And so this coach, this wonderfully sensitive, kind man, pulls me and the other 4 guys that had not played any aside right when we're starting the fourth quarter, and he said, guys, listen, I know we told you that you were going to get to play, but I just have a question for you. Do you want to play or do you want to win? Now, I really didn't care if I got in the game or not, because all I'm thinking is, what am I going to do? I don't even know the plays. How am I going to do any of this? My parents are in the stands because they drove down for this for whatever reason. It's the only first time they came down. And so I'm like, do I want to play or do I want to win? Now, my wheels are turning. I was pretty quick on my feet. I said, Coach, let's win. Because, I'm going to go out there and get beat up. I don't even know what to do. It's not the best way to handle it, right? But as fate would have it, Aguilar and the boys went out fourth quarter, first drive. And for the first time in 3 or 4 series, they don't score. So then it's evident that we're going to lose the game. So then the coach comes on and says, okay, you guys get ready. You're going to play. So I'll warm up. I'll go out on the field with a bunch of other guys that we barely even played together in practice. Luckily, they called most of the plays. I kind of knew what they were. So I handed off left, handed off right, pitch left, pitch right. And lo and behold, we marched down the field. We get down there 8 or 10 plays, and we're down on the 35-yard line. We're just chewing up turf. And I'm like, this is kind of fun. Feels like high school again. And then they call a pass play. So the pass play comes in, and I hear the guy say what the play is, because I think we shuttled people in back then. And I think, okay, I think I've seen this one time in practice. I sort of remembered what the play was. So it's a play where you sprint out a little bit, set up the pocket on the outside. And a kid named Anthony Metcalf wasn't very tall, but he was really fast. He was a wide receiver on this side. He was from Marble Falls. And the play was he was going to run what's called a post corner. So he goes down and he breaks to the middle of the field like he's running towards the goalpost, and then he snaps it off to the corner of the end zone. And the goal is right when he breaks is to let it go. And this is like miracle of miracles. I watch him and I'm like, this is going to be open. And my juices start flowing. And he breaks, and I let it go, and he runs under it. And the only pass I threw in college was the 35-yard touchdown. Thank you. 100% passing ratio. It's a good QBR. And then I knew, I quit playing after one semester. But it was a great experience. Got to be on the sidelines, got to travel a little bit, and I have one cool story to tell out of the deal. And lots of bruises. I just want to say this today, that like it or not, at some point, you can't keep standing on the sidelines. You may be reluctant like me. You may think, well, I don't know the Bible enough. I haven't been a Christian long enough. I don't have that kind of leadership skills. You may be standing over there thinking, yeah, I'd rather win than play. Yeah, just let somebody else play. You may be just like me, that at some point, you've got to just do this. At some point, you just got to strap your helmet in and get on the field. Because listen, this business of Christianity, there are no substitutes. There's no second team. We're all on the first team. You with me? We all have to get in the game. Pray, lead, love, use our gifts, give to the church, attend worship, encourage people, whatever it is. And we can't keep standing on the sidelines. You can't be afraid because you don't know everything that's going on like I was and go, I'd rather just stand over here, coach. We got to put our helmet on and get in the game. And I think as we're coming out of this COVID thing, it's time to shake the dust off and get in the game. And not expect somebody else to always do the stuff, but that you get in the game and do what you need to do. And so you may be sitting there sometimes when the pressure comes on and we need somebody to step up and lead and be the person in that situation, to be the one that says the hard thing and what needs to be said. And you can't be looking around for somebody else to be on the first string. You're on the first string. You're off the bench. Put your helmet on and get in the game. Because Ziklag is the place where the pressure comes on to see what's inside of you. Can I tell you that we don't come to worship just to come to worship? We don't go to Bible studies just because, oh, didn't that feel good? I learned a little bit of the Bible. No. We do those things so that there are things deposited in us so that when we're overwhelmed, what can we do? We can reach into a reserve that's already there, and draw upon that. I mean, these choices have to be hard, right? This place I'm at is hard. It's tough. One more thing almost knocked me off my feet. I'm completely overwhelmed. And that's when I go, now we're going to see what we're made of. Anybody can serve God and love Him and follow Him and say good things about God when their bills are paid and their kids are happy and their marriage is great and their job is great. But you let a few things come unhinged, and then we'll see what's really inside of people. It's the place of Ziklag. It's the place that we all have to go. Because Ziklag is not only a place where you're overwhelmed, it's a place where there's an opportunity to really show that you have something to give. This is the place where we got to go. And listen, think about how bad this place was. The men who cried here until they could cry no more, these weren't high school boys. These weren't middle school boys. These weren't fifth graders. These were grown men who had been in battle, killing people in the name of the Lord, going out. These were bad dudes, right? They were called the mighty men of God. And when they saw the city burned, imagine the smoke smoldering and their wives and their children are gone. It said that they wept until they could weep no more. This was a bad situation. What about you? Have you ever cried so long that you just thought, I can't cry anymore? Prayed so long for something to happen, you thought, I can't pray about that one more time. I've been praying for that for a decade. I can't pray about it one more time. This is the place where David was. And it says that David, despite what was going on around him, despite the emotion of what he was feeling, this is a place where it says David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. I think that all that time on the hillside, watching sheep, quoting scripture, writing psalms, being in the presence of God, had been deposited so deep in him that when he got to this place of Ziklag and the pressure was on, what came up out of him was something that was much bigger than the circumstances. And this is the place that we also can be. So how do you do it? Let me give you a couple little pointers at what David said here. It says that David was greatly distressed. Yeah, no kidding. All his wives and children are gone, and his men want to stone him. He's a little bit under pressure, wouldn't you say? But the next things that you do when you get under that kind of pressure are critical. You can't just make stuff up. You got to kind of know a little bit about what the steps are, right? Because there's this opportunity that's in front of you. So once you get your strength back and you start getting strength from the Lord, even in the situation that's overwhelming, your first inclination is going to be to take action. The first thing you're going to do, when you start getting strength back, you're going to go, okay, I know what to do. Here's what I'm going to do. But you notice what he did? Point number 2, ask God what he thinks before you act. In that situation, you can't just go. You got to say, okay, God, what do you think? I mean, he had the idea. He said, God, I want to pursue them. But what do you think? So here's verse 7. Here's what it says. And David said to Abiathar the priest, Ahimelech's son, bring the ephod to me. And Abiathar brought the ephod to David. So David, here's the key verse. David inquired of the Lord. Shall I pursue this truth? Shall I? He already had the idea, but he wanted to make sure God was with him before he did it. And that's the key step right there. And God said to him, pursue, for you shall surely overtake them, and without fail recover all. So what's the ephod about? The ephod was a vest, and it was kind of long, and it's what the priest wore when he led prayer and worship. So David, I think what he wanted to do was to let on the outside show what was going on him on the inside, which was prayer and praise. It's a pretty interesting place to get when your wives and children are gone and you think they're probably going to die at the hand of an enemy and your men want to kill you. But that's exactly what happened. In that moment, he began to pray and praise and get kind of an attitude of prayer and praise and to become calm about it. And then principle number 3, it's really more of a principle than a point. Here's principle number 3. We've got to have faith that God will restore things in your life. When you're at the place of being overwhelmed, you're probably losing something, or things are falling apart in a way that's hard for you to have imagined before. And then somehow you've got to believe that God has an ability to step in and loves you so much to restore things. That's what happened to David. Verse 17, it says, because the Lord said, yes, go get them. David convinces his men, okay, guys, time to quit crying. Let's go. We're going to go find our wives and children. We're going to fight these men. We're going to take their heads off. The enemy shall not prevail today. So they get up behind him, and it says, then David attacked them from twilight until the evening of the next day, and not a man of them escaped. It was total victory. Now, they do say this, except 400 young men. So let the young men go. They didn't kill the boys. And then verse 18, so David recovered all that the Amalekites had carried away. All that they carried away. And David rescued his 2 wives. Verse 19, and nothing of theirs was lacking, either small or great, sons or daughters, spoil or anything, which they had taken from them. David recovered all. They got all their wives and children back. They got all of their goods, all of their valuables that were stolen. It was a total restoration of what was going on in that situation. There's a picture here for us of what God, I think, wants to do. None of us probably are going to draw swords and literally fight the way that David and his men do. But I can guarantee you that every one of us in this room at some point is going to have to draw our spiritual sword and fight back discouragement and feeling overwhelmed and disappointment and bitterness and get through those spiritual things that we really know how to fight. It is the phrase, unsheath thy sword, O mighty man of valor. Draw it out. There's times you got to take it out. Because listen, Ziklag and David and his men, what they're going to fight is the same basis that we're going to be. They're going to be situations that are just like that. They're overwhelming. In the midst of that, you have to gather yourself. You have to ask the Lord what he thinks before you take a step. Then listen for his voice. And then do this. Expect God to be good and expect him to be with you. And then live with confidence that he'll be like that. And principle number 4 doesn't sound like a spiritual principle, but it's this. Be a team player. At the end of this story, it's kind of interesting. En route to chasing the Amalekites, they must have gone on a brutal pace. They were on horses. They're going as fast as they can. They were on foot, whatever it was. But out of the 600 men, 200 of them got tired. And they got to a certain place and they said, we just can't go on anymore. They were already tired from all the other fighting they had done before Ziklag. I'm sure they were tired from crying at Ziklag. And they stayed behind. And look what happens in verse 21. Now David came to the 200 men who had been so weary. This is after they'd already gotten everything back. And that they were so weary they could not follow David, whom they also had made to stay at the brook of Besor. So they went out to meet David and meet the people who were with them. And then David came near the people. He greeted them. And then listen to this, verse 22. Then all the wicked and worthless men of those who were with David answered and said, because they did not go with us. Let me just paraphrase here. Because they did not go with us, they don't get to share in the spoils of the victory. Look at David's response. David says, my brethren, you shall not do this with what the Lord has given us. In other words, how can you withhold this from them? They're your brothers. They've been fighting with you all along. They just got tired in this situation. They deserve as much as what you're getting. And by the way, you didn't get it because you got it. You got it because the Lord gave it to you. And he kind of reminds them of that. And he says, as his part who goes down to the battle, so shall his part who stays by the supplies. Verse 24. In other words, people that are guarding the supplies back there that got tired, they're going to get the same thing as the guys that went into the battle. Okay, now why is that important? I want to say this. The economy of the kingdom is different than the world's economy. You know the story that Jesus told? The workers were working in the field. Some of them started in the morning, some of them started at noon, some of them started later in the afternoon. Remember this story? And he said the ones who started in the middle of the day get the same amount as the ones at the beginning of the day. Years ago, I met a couple that had moved to Brownwood from the Metroplex. He came here to be the manager of the Blockbuster. Y'all remember back in the day when we used to rent DVDs and put them in machines to watch movies? Seems like generations ago. I remember when phones were plugged into walls. Anybody remember that? So I met this couple. His wife was coming to our church some, and I got to talking to him one day. And he had a very interesting job before he came to be there. He was the Zamboni driver for the Dallas Stars. Everybody know what the Zamboni driver, the machine that makes the ice smooth, right? So he worked for the Dallas Stars, and he happened to be working for the Dallas hockey team when they won the Stanley Cup. Only time they've won it. I went back and looked it up. It was in 1999. And I said, well, what was that like? I mean, I was intrigued then. I'm like, you were a part of a world championship franchise, but all you did was, make sure that the ice was smooth. Be kind of like the guy that does the laundry or something. And he said, well, it's cool. He said, I've got pictures of my baby. They had a baby about that time, sitting inside the Stanley Cup. I said, really? They let you hold the cup? He goes, oh, yeah, everybody's on the team. He goes, me and the locker manager and everybody, we got to hold the cup, take pictures with it, stand there with it. What am I saying to you? These guys wanted to say, because those guys got tired back there and didn't come and actually do the fighting, they were back there guarding the supplies, that they don't get anything. And part of this whole idea of being overwhelmed and facing discouragement is that we have to remember that in the kingdom, we're team players.